What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 13 update here on That Franchise Guy. Before we jump in here, a few notes. For the first time in really a few weeks, I took a look at EA's default vanilla roster, as you call it, and to be honest, what resulted in doing that was me being even more inspired to work on the roster this week. There are so many issues with that default roster. You know, in my roster overview back in the preseason that I'll link here, I already covered what is to me the biggest problem in this game, where there are way too many good players, mid-80s and such, but kind of having honestly ignored EA's updates over the last few weeks, it's getting worse and worse. This roster is borderline unusable at this point. There's so many unjustifiable, frankly inexcusable ratings in this game. So to that point, I'll be making here very shortly a video that I'm excited to make, which will be the 10 worst ratings EA has right now. And I get it's just a video game. This whole roster is my opinion, but a lot of us are really passionate about this game and the game of football. And as someone looking to make a career out of scouting, as an employee at Pro Football Focus who makes their money rating players, I really do get a kick out of making this roster. But I wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. Your support, especially this year, has been awesome. I want to thank all of you for the feedback, the recommendations, liking the videos and all that. And that goes for the people who are critical too. You know, I do my best, but I can't watch all 3,000 players on the field every week. But without some of you bringing my attention to those players, they would go unnoticed. The use of certain choice words at times might be unnecessary, but I'm truly thankful for all of you who have been there with me over the last 15 months or so. So anyway, with taking a look at more of the bigger picture here, I ended up taking a much different approach to the update this week. In the past, I've been talking about players who stood out in that given week, but in reviewing my roster, there are certain players who might not have stood out any specific week, but over the course of the year have had seasons worth talking about, whether that's good or bad for the player. So I took much more of a macro approach this week. The video is going to be longer, just a warning, but I think it's going to be one of the better, more interesting updates of the year. And we're actually going to do this week position by position, but before we do, let's talk about the star of the week, and it is Josh Gordon. And I haven't exactly been an advocate of Josh Gordon on this channel. I definitely won't hide from that, but it is important to admit when you're wrong in a position like this, and I was wrong. He's back, he's got his head on his shoulders, and he looked great. So the stats weren't incredible, but you got Casey Hayward saying it was the toughest cover he's had all week, and I'm definitely buying back into Josh Gordon. I don't know if I'm gonna say I'm a fan of the guy yet. He's gotten so many opportunities, so many chances, but definitely a good thing going there for the Browns. Josh Gordon going up +5 this week as an 80 overall now, so he goes from the 61st overall receiver to the 32nd now, and could definitely continue to skyrocket if he stays on the field, and looks like he did. So as I mentioned, we're gonna go through this roster position by position. We're gonna start with the quarterbacks. Now, there's only one quarterback moving in this week's update, and it's Jared Goff. And the only reason there's only one quarterback here is I think, you know, maybe it's just me being stubborn, but I really do believe, and I think people that have followed this channel going back the last 15 months, quarterback is the position I think I'm pretty accurate at. I've had some really good calls here, and I haven't had a ton of movement in general this year. My ratings really have stood up as to what we've seen from these quarterbacks this year. Now, Jared Goff, across the course of the year, has been really good, so he goes up +2. I will say he's got an awesome surrounding situation. He hasn't necessarily blown me away on film, but he has definitely shown that he can at least be Matt Ryan and make all the throws when they're there. I do have concerns about his ability to extend plays when the play call isn't there, but for now, a good year for Jared Goff, +2. Let's move on to running backs. We have Alvin Kamara going up yet again. He's been moving up, skyrocketing the last month or so. So he goes up +3 again. Definitely buying into Kamara. So he's an 86 overall now. That makes him the 16th overall. Actually, that brings him from 16th to 8th overall as a running back. Alex Collins going up +4. Starting to buy into him a little bit. He's been a nice little kick for this Ravens team that's been on a winning streak in large part because of him. Really good athlete. and a guy that could continue to emerge as a true starting running back in this league. Mike Davis goes up +4, gets added by the Seahawks a few weeks ago, and now he's just this month's flash in the pan running back for the Seahawks. It's really hard to pinpoint who is the best running back on the Seahawks team. You had Thomas Rawls was really the first flash in the pan guy. Chris Carson earlier this year. J.D. McKissick had his time in the sun. C.J. Prosise has had some good games. Eddie Lacy's kind of been there, but then Mike Davis really breaks out this week. So he goes up +4 coming off the really free agent rating of 67 overall. But he is only 24 and he's got a lot of physical upside, so maybe something comes of him. I kind of doubt it though. And then Kenyon Drake goes up +4. He's starting to show that he's a good athlete and can make some moves and have big games here and there. I don't know if I'm totally buying that yet. It's hard to buy into anyone on that Dolphins team. And then Austin Eckler, the third down back for the Chargers, undrafted rookie, nice little receiving back there. He goes up +5, is going to play like a good receiving back here on this roster. And then fallers at the running back position, we got Jonathan Stewart -4. Is he entering that career purgatory as an older running back? Hasn't really been very explosive this year, so he goes down -4. Ty Montgomery goes down -4. He was an 82. He really kind of disappointed after those first 2 weeks. And you'll notice his injury rating is going to go down as well. He really can't stay healthy as a running back. And then Thomas Rawls goes down -2, a healthy scratch nowadays. Hard to explain what's going on there. I really liked what Thomas Rawls was back a couple years ago. Thought he had some quickness, good size, but just can't even get on the field. So he goes down to a 73 overall now. On to receivers. Now this is by far the most movement. I'm trying to get through these relatively quickly here, but there was a lot of guys here as I looked at the bigger picture here. DeAndre Hopkins surpasses Dez Bryant. Definitely, in my mind, a better receiver. So he goes +1, and then Dez Bryant -2. And then I guess also rising this week, we'll just go through by risers. Nelson Aguilar +1, having a real solid year for Philly. Really showing that he was probably worth the first round pick. He's going to have to continue to develop to get into that star range, but definitely on the right path there for Nelson Aguilar. And then Tyreek Hill going up +3. He hadn't really been touched this year because he hadn't had a single week really where he's been just exploding, but he's been really consistent across the course of the year. He's showing that he is more than just a little toy that you run certain plays for. He is a legitimate receiver, 83 overall now, and now the question's going to become, does that upside continue to go? Does he become an Odell Beckham, a guy that has elite route running and can make tough catches, or does he stay as more of just a Deshaun Jackson who you use his speed, stretch the field, is going to make the catch when he's open? It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. I think if Pat Mahomes eventually takes over, that could be when we see Tyreek Hill get his opportunity to really emerge as a superstar receiver. And then we got a big chunk of fallers now. So Emmanuel Sanders -4. He has really fallen off, and I get that that whole offense has struggled, but I think he's kind of a reason why. He's not as explosive anymore, and his PFF rating is really bad this year. He goes from 8th to 22nd overall receivers, and then Demaryius Thomas goes down -2 as well. So he goes from 11th to 19th, but Demaryius Thomas is now higher than Emmanuel Sanders. And then Martavis Bryant -5, and he's had opportunities these last few weeks. Juju getting hurt, not on the field. Martavis Bryant did not capitalize that much. He had a decent game. He caught a touchdown, but he was rated as an 82 overall, and he has not met that potential at this point. So he sits at 77 right now, still a fine player, but has not shown enough for me to be comfortable putting him into the 80s. Corey Coleman -2. He has not been able to really develop so far in Cleveland. He broke out early on in his career. Looked like he was going to be really solid, but just hasn't really developed there in Cleveland, and neither have most of the players in Cleveland. And John Ross, a big faller this week, -4. You'll notice his injury goes way down. I mean, he's really just a twig, and I like John Ross coming out of the draft. I really did. I thought he should have gone in the top 10, which was probably a bad evaluation by me. But I think if he can get healthy, he'll be good. And obviously, he's still going to play great. He's still super fast. You're going to love having him in Madden. But as far as real life is concerned, he's a long way away from being an impact player, which is 78 overall, should be in Madden. It is on my roster. Not so much on EA's, but he's a 74 now. Going to be a little more of a project than before. And then Brandon LaFell, also for the Bengals, comes down to that 74 mark. Devontae Parker has been quite disappointing this year. He comes down just -1. Kenny Britt -1 again. He's already fallen off the face of the earth on this rating. So he's down to 74. Torrey Smith -2. Now he's been kind of a disappointment for the Eagles, I would say. The other weapons have really been much more involved than him. And then Eric Decker -2 as well. Probably just still had him even too high, though he's like a mid to low 80s in the vanilla roster. I mean, come on. Eric Decker is not an impact player at this point. He's a third down weapon with sure hands. But he's not really creating separation, not really making an impact on that team. So that does it for the receivers. Let's move on to tight end. Jordan Reed overall not changing, but the injury needed to be touched. 84 to a 66. The guy just can't stay healthy. Now that might seem low, but you know, this is a realistic roster. The guy should be getting hurt. The guy's never finished a complete season. And 66, that's like the equivalent of having a linebacker with 66 zone coverage. It's just going to be a liability for that player, which is Jordan Reed's injuries. So I think that's very fair. Hunter Henry goes up +4 this week. He's been real consistent throughout the course of the year, but hasn't had a single week where he's caught my attention, but definitely needed to be raised. David Morgan, tight end for the Vikings, he goes up +2. He's been a truly underrated piece of that offense. His blocking is pretty incredible. And I saw multiple highlights of him blocking just this week. And then Steven Anderson, he goes up +3, tight end for the Texans. And he's a guy that could actually emerge as a weapon here. I think there might be some potential here, just moving up +3 this week. But as he becomes more and more involved, we could see him get into the 70s. And then Ricky Seals-Jones goes up again, +2, staying involved here. But again, I'm not overreacting. He's only playing like 15 to 20% of the snaps on this team. A purely receiving guy. He's not going to block that well, but is definitely going to be a fun project for your franchise, just like he has been for the Cardinals. And he's going to be a good receiver. So now on to the offensive linemen. We'll start with the tackles. Now I will admit these ratings are purely based on my PFF resources. I find that much easier for me, as I don't really, catch the attention of the linemen as I'm watching everyone else. I'm not re-watching each game. I'm watching each game, but it's really hard to keep up with the offensive linemen. It's definitely the hardest part of this roster, as I'm sure you can imagine. So I'm basically outsourcing these ratings to PFF, which I'm comfortable doing. I think that the way they do, especially offensive linemen, is really effective. There's still going to be parts of offensive ratings that have my opinions faced into them. Contracts still come into play, what their history has been, all that stuff. It still comes into play, but as far as rising and falling guys, that's going to be what PFF is seeing. So Darryl Williams, the right tackle for the Panthers, has been fantastic. He is the second highest rated tackle in football on PFF, behind Lane Johnson, right tackle that is. So he goes up +7. All the way up to an 82 overall. Now that's been a very pleasant surprise for that Panthers team, who was pretty desperate for tackle help. DeMar Dotson, +3 in Tampa. Mitchell Schwartz, +2 for the Chiefs, right tackle. And then Jack Conklin, another right tackle, +2. He had a slow start to the year. I threw some questions at him. I think as a pass blocker, he still has room to grow, but he is a very solid right tackle. He struggled early, but has really turned it around and has been pretty consistent there for the Titans. And then the fallers for the tackles: Cordy Glenn of the Bills, -3. Brian Bulaga, -5. And his injury comes way down as well. He just has never been able to stay healthy for the Packers. He might actually be on his way out in Green Bay, as Jason Spriggs has filled in real nice at right tackle for the Packers. Morgan Moses, -3. Ryan Schrader was probably just a little high. He comes down -2. Zach Strief, -3. Just kind of getting up there in age. He was rated real high, and he might not be on the Saints next year, as Ryan Ramczyk and Armstead are there. And then the interior guys, really not any guards moving, but Jason Kelsey, a little oversight on my end. He's having a fantastic year, the highest rated center in football now. He does have struggles pass blocking because he is undersized, but so physical, such a great run blocker. So the run blocking and the impact blocking comes up, and he goes up +9, the biggest riser of this week. And then David Andrews +4 for the Patriots. And then fallers, we got Travis Swanson for Detroit -4. He's been pretty bad this year. Corey Linsley was probably rated a little high. He comes down -4. Marquise Pouncey -3 for the Steelers. Mike Pouncey -7. He's really struggled and he has injury problems. He might need to be replaced there for Miami. And then Weston Richburg was just a little high, -2, and Max Unger -4, actually struggling a little bit. He's been fine, but he was rated pretty high. So that does it for the offense. Like I said, big update this week, but not quite as many guys on the defensive side of the ball. We're going to start with the D linemen. Shelby Harris for the Broncos has been playing pretty well, +5. He was rated real low. Same with Trayvon Hester for the Raiders, and he's been really becoming a full-time rotational starter there for this team, and he's been the highest rated D lineman there for the Raiders. Kenny Clark is having a crazy year for Green Bay. Now, he is an 87 in EA's roster, which seems a little high to me. He's having a good year, but slow your roll a little bit. I'd like to see more than even just a full year to take that big of a jump as someone who started as a 72 overall off a pretty disappointing rookie year. So Kenny Clark +3, and then Dalvin Tomlinson, I had kind of oversight on him. The Giants have been pretty miserable this year, but Dalvin Tomlinson, rookie D tackle, +5. He's been real good. And then the fallers, you got Mario Edwards Jr., a little hype going into the year for him, DN for the Raiders, but he's been pretty bad. And that team is probably still last in sacks. I know they were a few weeks ago, but he's not helping in the pass rush at all. He's just a rotational D lineman at this point. Ziggy Hoods having a real bad year for the Redskins. He's been falling throughout the year, but he comes down -3, so he's a 69 overall now. Alan Branch had his best year last year, so he comes down -5. He hadn't really been touched, but he's not making an impact really for that Patriots team. He is a nose tackle, so he's a little harder to notice. But as a guy who was really making a lot of plays out of that position last year, just needed to come down. Same situation with Chris Baker, who was great in Washington last year, -4 this week, just not really doing much for Tampa. And then Malik Collins, second-year D tackle in Dallas, has had a pretty bad year, -4. Edge rushers, just two guys falling. D Ford, who was incredible last year, has pretty much fallen off the face of the earth this year. And he's still starting as Tamba Hali is either really old or still recovering from that injury. But a big reason that Chiefs defense has struggled is D Ford has not been the impact off the edge as this team would have hoped. And then Robert Quinn, who was rated very high, is going down -5 this week. And that Rams defense does kind of need some help on the edge, if I'm going to be completely honest. They got Donald in the middle, but Robert Quinn has been pretty average this year. So where he's at right now is an 83. Might even be a little high, but it is just kind of out of respect for what he's been able to do in the past and being optimistic that he'll be able to turn it on maybe in the playoffs. I don't know. And then linebacker, just one guy this week. I was pretty satisfied with where the linebackers were at, but Rueben Foster also could have been a star this week. I mean, this guy was great early in the year, got hurt, and has come back. He actually moves to middle linebacker in this defense now. He goes up +4, and I am absolutely convinced that he's going to be a top 3, if not number 1 middle linebacker in this league in a couple years. I think the 49ers have a lot of potential on that defense, and Rueben Foster is going to be able to fly around and be a great leader on that team. It is important here, though, that we talk, while we're on the topic of linebackers, about Ryan Shazier. Man, that injury just devastating. I was sick to my stomach watching that play, his reaction, and then the news, not great. Doesn't sound like he's going to play again. And out of respect for Shazier and the player he is and the Madden god that he is, I mean, him and Jalen Ramsey have got to be the two players that people want to have on their Madden team. And we may have lost that player. For now, what I've done with Shazier, I lowered his physical traits, so strength, agility, speed and acceleration, all -1, and then that injury is going to come down to 75. But if we get news in the next week that his career is over, and it's actually looking like it is, I'm going to have to move him to punter and take him out of the roster, which is sad. But if you want to be able to use him, you'll always be able to change that in your franchise modes. But I got to keep this thing realistic, as much as that sucks. So moving on to corners, we've got Trevor Williams, the corner for the Chargers, has been awesome this year. He's got a pretty nice little gig there, playing behind that pass rush and also covering secondary options as Casey Hayward's following guys around. But he's been great. He's not getting beat. He's not getting picked on. And, this Chargers defense, man, I said it going into the year that the home field thing is weird, but this team has just as much potential as anybody. And I think they're going to win this division. I feel pretty confident about that at this point. They're going to get into the playoffs, and if they beat the Patriots, if they beat the Steelers and go to the Super Bowl, I'm going to be the least surprised out of most people because, man, this team has so much talent. You got a great quarterback in Phillip Rivers who's clicking. And I think this is the best defense in football. I would take this defense over Jacksonville right now. I just think the pass rush is more consistent, and I like the secondary. Obviously, you like Jacksonville's as well, but when you pair it with an offense like this and you can stay fresh, it's a little easier to be as good as they are. So anyway, I digress. Let's get back here. Kendall Fuller's having a nice year. One of the Fuller brothers for the Redskins. He goes up +4. And then Akello Witherspoon joining a class of impressive rookie corners. He goes up +4, might play into the long-term plans there for that young 49ers defense. And then some fallers at corner, just some guys that have struggled throughout the year. Brent Grimes, old corner, not really being a superstar for that Bucs defense. He goes down -3. Kevin Johnson is a corner that I've always kind of liked, but his ratings are pretty low this year, and that Texans defense has been vulnerable at times in that secondary. He's been a part of that. So he goes down -3. And then David Amerson, who I've loved in the past on this channel. But to be honest, a big reason I've been high on Amerson is his play instincts, his run defense, his ability to play the ball when it's in the air. It's never really been that he's a lockdown corner, and that's being exposed this year as this Raiders defense has been miserable. So he's still going to be pretty solid. I think he is a good corner to have on your team. He definitely should be starting and all that. But he comes down -6. The coverage just not very good. And that Raiders defense is so bad. They need talent all across the board. And I feel bad for Khalil Mack because he doesn't really get a chance to shine when there's no one around him. And then moving on to the safeties, quite a bit of movement here. Adrian Amos +4. He's an 88 now in EA's roster. He's having a great year. This Bears defense has been real solid. Amos is coming on. He has all the physical abilities. I loved him at Penn State. I was surprised he went as late as he did, and he's definitely emerging as a star safety in this league. Kevin Byard +2, and he's another guy who's maybe a little high on EA's ratings. He's like an 89. So he comes up to a 79 for me. I mean, let's be honest. The Titans aren't really playing anyone. None of their wins have been impressive. And yeah, Byard's playing well, but let's see him, make plays in the playoffs or be a big reason they beat a good team. You can do all these nice things, but I'm not ready to make you an 89 overall in your second year just because of some PFF ratings, and I'm not even ripping on PFF. I just think it's an overreaction from EA. This is a guy that was a questionable guy to even be a starter coming into this year, and he was fine as a rookie. But 79 is a good safety. So anyway, that's enough ranting about that. Let's move on. Adrian Kolbert, starting safety now for the 49ers. Now they've been pretty beat up. They've had a lot of injuries, but Kolbert has been filling in and starting. He's a young guy, pretty sure undrafted safety, but has been serviceable as a safety. So he comes up to a 70. And then John Johnson has been the starting safety for the Rams. I believe a third-round pick out of Boston College, and he's been real good. Both those safeties there in LA have been real good. And so Johnson comes up +4. He's a 75 now. And falling at safety, Ron Parker, who kind of broke out last year, has been getting beat and been hard to find on that defense. He comes down -7 this week. So he drops below the 80s now as a 79. Eric Weddle, -4. I just kind of think he's a little high at this point. He's definitely a very good safety, definitely still one of the 10 best in the league that you would want. But at 32 years old, probably not as explosive as he once was, not making quite as many plays, still very instinctive, but getting bullied around in the run game a little bit, can't cover quite as much ground. So he comes down from 91 to 87. And then Darian Stewart, another guy getting up there in age, he comes down -4, and that Broncos defense just kind of slowly falling apart, aging slowly. Definitely my worst call of the year. I thought that Broncos defense was going to be back as a top 2 unit, and granted they're on the field all the time, but you know, when you get a guy like Darian Stewart, who was a big impact, falling off to more towards that just kind of baseline starting level play, that's the kind of thing that makes a legendary defense just another defense. Jonathan Cyprien for the Titans comes down -4, just not covering all that well in my opinion, but a really good run defender, more of a linebacker anyway. And then Tavon Wilson comes down -4, just leaving the 80s here as more of a starting caliber safety now. And then we're almost done, but we actually are going to talk about kickers and punters this week because I don't even touch these guys, really. But Greg Zuerlein, Greg the Leg, has been the kicker of the year. He goes from 81 to an 89, but Justin Tucker had to move him up as well. I still think he's the best kicker that I would want kicking a field goal any given week, any given kick. So he goes 87 to a 90. Chandler Catanzaro's been real good for the Jets, 76 to an 81. Will Lutz, been real good for the Saints, 79 to an 85. And then some punters. Brett Kearns, 79 to an 86. He's been one of the best punters this year. Rigoberto Sanchez for the Colts, a rookie, goes from 72 to a 79. He's been one of the higher rated punters this year. And then John Ryan. Thought he was a little low, so 77 to an 82. Those are really just the standout guys that I felt needed to be touched. Not a lot of movement in general for the kickers and punters. So I hope you stuck this out. I know it was longer this week. Maybe threw it in your pocket as a podcast or something, but I hope you liked the video if you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys next week. Keep an eye out for that top 10 worst rated players by EA video. Should definitely be out this weekend. A lot of you have been asking too about my Colts rebuild series. I want to sit down and record that whenever I get the chance. I know a lot of you are looking forward to that, so I'll try and get that out as soon as possible. Cheers everyone, we'll see you next time.